video, I'll show you around the SuperCore grid set and talk you through the main features, including the core vocabulary, dynamic columns, activity grids, and expanded grids. I'll also tell you a bit about the different features and ideas which have been built into SuperCore to help AAC learners and their communication partners to get started and be successful with AAC. Let's start with the home grid, which is the first grid you see when you open SuperCore. Most of the home grid is made up of a set of 32 core words, often called core vocabulary. Core words are the words we use all the time in different situations, with different people, at different times, and we can use them really flexibly to talk about lots of different things. I'll give you a few examples just to show you what I mean.
I like this. I like this. I want to do it. I want to do it. I need more now. I need more now.
So you see with these few examples how I can start to build short sentences using just those 32 core words. The set of 32 core words was chosen after a really comprehensive review of research into core vocabulary, looking at the most frequently used words used by a range of populations, including preschoolers, school-aged children and adults, spoken language and written language, and also the language of AAC users. This has led to a really functional and powerful core vocabulary. So far I've just used these core words, but I'll show you later in the video how we can combine core words with words which are specific to a topic or activity, and how these core words become even more powerful when we do this. First though, I'm going to show you how you can use these core words in combination with the useful next words. These 5 words at the moment show you who, what, why, where and when, because these question words are really useful next words when you haven't said anything yet, and they allow you to ask a question quickly without leaving the core grid. When I select other core words on this grid, you'll see that the words in these cells change and look a bit like prediction cells that we see on other AAC vocabularies. But the problem with prediction cells, particularly with someone who's just starting to learn AAC, is that the words which appear and the order they appear in changes. So with the useful next words in SuperCore, the words that appear are predictable and in consistent locations. So if I select the word I, the useful next words will always be really, feel, think, play and finish in that order, allowing the AAC learner to build up a motor plan for those words. There's also a lot of repetition between different core words and the useful next words. So for example, if I choose you or can, the useful next words are the same. These useful next words are words which can be found elsewhere in the grid set, but by having them here with the core, the need for navigating between different grids is reduced and allows the AAC learner to just focus on the grid that they are on when they're getting started. Let's see a couple of examples of the useful next word cells in action.
It is my favourite. It is my favourite.
There we saw the word favourite appear after we chose the word my. Next we'll see that sometimes the words which appear in the useful next word cells are words that get joined on to the previous word.
I am going to do it myself. I am going to do it myself.
So you'll see that the word self has been joined onto the word my to allow you to say myself quickly and easily without leaving the home grid. You might also have noticed that some of the core words were changing as the sentence progressed to automatically show the correct grammatical forms. This is smart grammar and means that the AAC learner can stay focused on their message without having to worry about selecting the right verb tense, all staying on one grid. Let's look at another example using the useful next words so you can see the smart grammar at work too.
I am going to go with her. I am going to go with her.
You might have noticed as well that after each message I was selecting the chat writing area at the top to hear my message spoken back to me. You can also delete a word or clear the whole message using the clear and delete word cells in the top right corner. Next, we're going to look at the dynamic columns, which are fundamental to how SuperCore works and how these columns give AAC learners access to lots more vocabulary without them needing to do a lot of navigation away from the home grid. We'll start with two of the most important cells in SuperCore, the jumps to daily and play, where you'll find lots and lots of vocabulary specific to daily activities and play activities. One of the problems I've heard a lot when working with AAC learners is when a learner first starts to use AAC and the family or the professional working with them asks, where do I start, when do I use it, how do I find those opportunities to start using AAC every day? And the daily and play activity grids are designed to really help address this problem. If we first look at the daily activity grids, straight away we see lots of opportunities for using AAC. Every time the learner uses the toilet, eats or drinks something, washes, dresses, etc. In each activity grid, you'll find a carefully selected set of words linked to that activity. So if we start by looking at washing, we get words like
wash, dry, dirty, clean.
Words which are all really functional and relevant to that activity, so that the AAC learner can start to explore those words and we can easily respond to them in that activity. Learners can also choose to just use words from the dynamic column, for example,
wash, towel,
or they can start to combine these words with the core vocabulary, which is the same as it was on that home grid. For example,
want, wash, want wash.
All the way up to more complex sentences.
It is dirty, and I need to wash it with soap and hot water. It is dirty and I need to wash it with soap and hot water.
Once the AAC learner's more familiar with those single words, there's also a link to phrases, which are often linked to the meaning of the word which appeared on that cell on the previous grid. So I'll show you what that means. If I select phrases, I can see all of the phrases I've got available for my washing grid. And we now have the phrase I need a towel where the word towel was. And where the word water was, we have the phrase turn the tap on. Phrases can be useful for getting a message across quickly and also offer a way for the AAC learner to explore language. If you think about how we learn foreign languages, it's really common to learn a whole phrase and which situation you can use it in, sometimes even before you know what all of the individual words mean and before you've learned about all of the grammar for that language. We also know from research that AAC users are seen by others as more competent if they use whole phrases and sentences compared to just using single words. So whilst we need to focus on teaching those single words to encourage the most flexible communication possible, there are also big advantages in having access to whole phrases. As well as daily activities, I also mentioned play activities because, as well as it being important to find regular opportunities to use AAC throughout the day, it's also really important to make it fun and motivating. So I'm going to go into play and choose bubbles and see what words that gives me. Just with our daily activities, the learner can start by just using single words from the dynamic columns.
Bubbles. Pop.
They can start to build up phrases.
Pop. Bubbles. Blow. Bubbles. Up.
Or they can use the activity words in combination with the core vocabulary.
Want. More. Bubbles. Want more bubbles. I like big bubbles. I like big bubbles.
And again, we've got a link to phrases, although this time there's a consistent set of really functional play activity phrases which goes across all of the play activities. Phrases like...
It's my turn. Can you help me do it? Will you play with me?
The daily and play activity grids give a range of opportunities to use AAC every single day at different times in different situations. There's also a lot of repetition across the different activity grids. For example, the word again appears in several play activity grids as it's a really useful word for getting fun things to happen again. Next, I'm going to show you around the other jumps in the dynamic columns. As I explained earlier on, the dynamic columns are a really useful way of getting more useful vocabulary without having to navigate away from that home grid of core vocabulary. So let's look at each of the remaining jumps in the dynamic columns. First, let's look at chat. Chat gives you access to useful chat words and phrases, just like the activity grids we just looked at. So you can say common social words like
Hi.
Or
please,
but also comments like
wow,
and
hey.
Again, we have a useful link to chat phrases to support the AAC learner to communicate for a range of different reasons, such as making a quick comment.
It's all gone. I made a mistake.
Making a request.
Do it again.
Or getting someone's attention.
Look at this.
Next in the dynamic columns we have news. This is an area of Supercore which gives you space to add in the learner's news about what they've been doing. This might be telling people at school what they did at the weekend or in the school holidays, or telling their family what they did at nursery that day. News is great for helping to engage families and education settings with an AAC device and encouraging the device to be used at home and in the education setting on a regular basis. I've worked with lots of AAC learners who find it really motivating to share their news, and motivation is a really important part of AAC. Next we'll look at the position, places, time and feelings grids, as each of these grids works in a similar way. Each grid gives you access to a small set of carefully chosen words which you can use alongside the core. However, instead of access to phrases, you can access more words by selecting more in the top right corner. So I'll show you an example now using the position words, and I'll start my message using the core words.
Can you put this?
And then I need position words to finish my message.
Over there? Can you put this over there?
Just as with the other jumps from the dynamic columns we've seen so far, the core words have stayed in the same place, and it doesn't feel as though I've gone far from where I was before. If the position word I wanted wasn't in those two dynamic columns, I could expand the grid to get more position words. So an example might be
It goes in the middle.
and then I can select back to go back to those position words, or home to go all the way back. I'll show you another example using places.
I want to go to the park. I want to go to the park.
Or if I needed to get more places, I could use more in the top right corner. Now we'll look at time. Here we've got lots of common time words, which again we can use in combination with the core.
I am going to go tomorrow. I am going to go tomorrow.
Or if we need more time words, using more we can get access to vocabulary for days of the week, months of the year, etc., as well as a link to telling the time and a diary grid to add your activities for the week. Last in this middle block of the dynamic columns, I'm going to look at feelings. This time I've jumped to feelings first, and then I'm going to start my message using the core.
I am excited. I am excited.
And another example using a useful next word.
I feel tired. I feel tired.
Now if I want a feelings word which isn't in the dynamic columns, I can expand the columns using more. Once in the expanded feelings grid, I also have access to some helpful phrases to help me quickly get my message across. For example,
I'm feeling a little bit scared. I'm feeling a little bit scared.
Next, I'll talk you through the last 4 cells in the dynamic columns: topics, school, messages and spelling. First, let's have a look at topics. This is where you can get to lots and lots more words organised into different topics. So you can see there are topics like clothes, body parts and sports, as well as some more fun topics like magic. Words in each topic are organised into columns, grouped together by meaning. So if we look in transport, we'll see that all the vehicles which fly are in one column, all of the emergency vehicles are in another, etc. This encourages the learner to look across from left to right and then top to bottom, in the same way that we read. This also supports AAC learners using column row switch scanning to find the word that they need. Words which appear on more than one topic page are always in consistent locations, and wherever possible, words which are similar in meaning are also in the same location. So this means that the word
Fire engine
is in the same place as fire station and firefighter on the grids where we find those words. For topics where there are too many words to fit on a single grid, like food and animals, we go into animals. These both have a top grid with the most common vocabulary, with a jump to the subcategories across the bottom of the grid. This means that when you're first learning to use SuperCore, you could start just by focusing on learning the vocabulary on that top grid before exploring more vocabulary later. For example, with water animals, I might just start by teaching and exploring the words fish, frog, dolphin, whale and shark in that middle column, before exploring more water animals by going to the link at the bottom here. Some words appear in more than one subcategory to support the learner to find the word where they might logically go and look for it. So for example, fish appears in water animals, but also in pets. And it's also on the top page. Similarly, snake appears in the top grid, but also in pets and wild animals, always in that same place. Like we saw with fire engine, firefighter and fire station being in the same cell, the same thing is done here. So if I've learned where the word dog is in that top left corner, when I go to baby animals, puppy's in the same place. So it's in the location I've already learned. You'll see from the topics grid that there's also plenty of space to add in your own topics. If the AAC learner you're working with absolutely loves monster trucks, then you've got space to add a whole grid of vocabulary related to monster trucks. You can easily move between those topic grids and the core vocabulary to make sentences. For example, if I clear my message and start from home,
I want to play with my.
Now I'm going to topics and transport and
Fire engine.
then I'm going to go back home to get more core words
And my.
and then I can go back to my transport page
Bus.
to add another word. Supercore also includes school grids, which cover the key areas of learning, English, maths and science, but also include access to important early concepts such as colours, numbers and shapes, so you can quickly get to this vocabulary. Each of these pages works in a similar way to the grids we saw earlier, as you can expand them to get more vocabulary. So for example, if I go to art, I've got vocabulary down the side, but I can get access to more if I need it. There are also some example topics with subjects such as science. Let's go back and have a look at science. So I've got my key vocabulary down the side, but if I go to more, I've got some example topics here as well as space to add in your own. A key part of Supercore is support for literacy development, and within the school pages, as well as vocabulary in the English topic, we've got stories. So to start with, we just get that vocabulary down the right hand side that you could use whilst reading a story. If I go to more, I can see lots of popular storybooks, and each of these grids contains key vocabulary and repeated lines, allowing the AAC learner to join in with the story. Again, there are templates where you can add in your own stories. I talked earlier on about how important it can be to have access to whole phrases. As well as having activity-specific phrases, the messages section down here gives AAC learners a place to access quick phrases which can be used in a range of different situations for a range of different communication functions. Messages on this grid are grouped in columns with access to more messages at the bottom. So if I go to more help messages, you can see that expands out, and I can get back to that main page of messages by selecting the cross. Some example phrases are included in each of these grids, but there's plenty of space to add in your own phrases to personalise this to the AAC learner. Finally, in the dynamic columns, we have access to a keyboard for spelling, down here in the bottom right corner. The default keyboard in Supercore is a phonetic keyboard, so that when you select a letter, instead of hearing the name of the letter, you can hear the sound that letter makes, which is far more useful to someone learning to read and write. For example, D, O, G. You'll also notice that when I've selected letters which spell out a word, I'll see the symbol appear above that word. This page allows the AAC learner to explore letters and sounds and start to combine them. This exploration of letters and sounds is really important for early literacy development, and it's just one of the ways that Supercore helps to support literacy development. We've already seen some of the extended grids in Supercore when we looked at the position, places, time, feelings and some of the school grids. There are also extended grids for the core vocabulary, giving you access to more people words, question and action words, describing words and little words along the bottom of the grid. Each of the extended grids along the bottom of the grid are self-closing. This means that when you go into one and select a word, you'll automatically be taken back to the grid you were on before. This is really important to speed up communication. First, let's look at people words and see some examples. This grid gives access to more pronouns as well as words for different jobs that people do: family, friends and school people. Starting from the core, let's see how we can use that people grid.
I want to see my mum.
So you see that grid jumped me back to the core so that I can carry on my message.
Now,
If I want to stay on a self-closing grid to select more than one word, I can do this using the pin in the top left corner. For example, I might want to say,
I have a
now I'm going to use the pin,
baby sister.
and I can go back using the back button. It can also be useful sometimes to use the pin to stay on a grid and just spend some time exploring the words with the AAC learner. The subcategories in the extended pages are also self-closing. So, for example,
I want to be a firefighter.
so I went into jobs and chose firefighter and still automatically went back to the page I was on before. A final thing to say about the people grid is about the pronouns. Because English has so many pronouns, to simply have a page of all of them could be quite overwhelming. So to simplify this, reflexive pronouns such as yourself, himself, herself, etc. can be made using the self cell. For example, using the pin to stay on this grid because I want to use more than one word, I can say words like
Her. Herself.
herself or
Him. Himself.
himself. This design also allows learners to make the mistakes we also see in spoken language development, where a child might say
She. Herself.
she-self when they're still learning how to use pronouns. If the learner does this, as you've just seen, they'll find that the pronoun is corrected for them to support them to learn the correct word. Let's take a look at the other extended grids. If we look at questions, this grid gives us lots of useful words we use when asking questions, and it's where you'll find different forms of the verb to be. So that's is, am, are, was and were. So you can ask a question
Are
like,
you going home? Are you going home?
again, you can use the pin in the top left corner if you want to ask a question like,
How much will it be? How much will it be?
Next we have actions. This is where we can get all of the verbs in Supercore which aren't on the top grid. Because there are so many verbs, about 200 of them, they are grouped together in categories. This is instead of just having an A to Z list, which wouldn't be helpful if you hadn't learned the alphabet yet. The categories chosen are designed to help the communication partner talk to the child about why words are in a particular location, and also to help the communication partner, as well as the AAC learner, to remember where those words are. The 4 categories are actions related to thinking, feeling and talking. Let's have a look at those. Actions which commonly happen every day, including actions related to learning. And I'm just using these extended grid navigation cells across the bottom. The next category is actions which describe things we can do with objects. And finally, moving actions. These are actions where you can see movement. and if I select back, that takes me back to that core grid. Again, the action pages are self-closing for fast communication, but you can use the pin to stay on a page and explore it. This can be particularly helpful when you're teaching an AAC learner what all the words are and what they mean. Next, let's look at describe words. Just as we saw with the feelings grid, we've got some useful phrases and words on the left-hand side to support sentence building and reduce the need for navigation between multiple grids. And again, this extended grid is self-closing, but will stay open if you select one of these phrases. For example,
That's really clever. That's really clever.
so you saw that grid automatically jumped back when I selected the describing word. Describing words are also grouped together into categories, much like the action page, in categories designed to be easier to learn than simply having an A to Z list, although you do have access to one of those as well. The categories in the describing page are describing words for how something looks, or adjectives where you can see the meaning of the word. For example, you can see if something is the same or different. Although you can use these words to describe something you can't see, this is typically how a learner will first start using these words. Next, we have words which describe the quality of something, what something is like. So it's clever, it's quiet, it's easy, it's my favourite. Then we have words which describe how something feels, and this also includes related words, as we see hinted at by the words yummy, yucky and smelly. I'll have a look at feeling. We also have access to colour, shape and size words, so if I select any of those cells with the cut off black corner, that's going to take me to more words in that category. If I choose quality, for example, we've got lots more words to describe what something is like. Finally, we have little words. This is where we can get different types of words, including prepositions, adverbs and conjunctions. These include words like because, just, or, and as you will see, only some of the words on this page have symbols, because the symbols for these smaller words tend to be quite abstract and aren't really any more meaningful than the squiggly lines used to make the letters. So the symbols haven't been used to encourage development of sight reading for these words. This grid is also self-closing, but if you select the words any, every, some or no, the grid will stay open, allowing you to make words like anything, everyone or somewhere, which I'll just show you now.
Anything.
And another example.
Anyone.
The final part of this tutorial will look at the magic wand. The magic wand is the place to go in Supercore to fix things. This is a child-friendly way to teach AAC learners grammar and some other useful skills. Firstly, looking at grammar, I'm going to start my sentence.
I go.
But if what I'm talking about is something that's already happened, I need to fix the word go, because the meaning is right, but the verb tense isn't. So if I go to my magic wand, I can see all the different verb forms, and there in that top row I can choose went to fix my sentence. And let's see another example.
I stopped.
A lot of the time though, Supercore will work out the grammar for the AAC learner. For example,
I am going.
Or
I have stopped.
but sometimes the magic wand comes in handy when Supercore can't possibly tell what verb tense you'll need. Another example might be if you aren't using a full sentence, which is a common part of typical conversation. So if somebody asks you, "What are you doing now?" you might say "going home" rather than "I am going home." or if they say, "What were you doing?" it's perfectly acceptable that the AAC learner might want to say, "Helping him." We don't always speak in full sentences, so shouldn't always expect an AAC learner to. Now we've seen this, I'll show you how other action words, or verbs, in SuperCore allow you to change the verb tense in a similar way. To be consistent with the magic wand page, when I select verbs elsewhere in SuperCore, I'll see how the useful next word cells show me the different verb forms. For example, if I go to the bubbles grid, if I wanted to say I blew bubbles, I'll show you how I can do that.
I blow.
And then we see our different verb options.
Blew bubbles. I blew bubbles.
Now back to the magic wand grid, where here I can also add word endings to make words such as easier, biggest, and quickly. You'll see that even if the spelling doesn't work, simply by adding the word ending, SuperCore fixes the spelling automatically. Now let's look at an example using the word big.
It is big.
Go to my magic wand,
Bigger.
add ER, and the spelling's automatically corrected for me. Also in the magic wand page, we can fix problems which might happen with the AAC learner's communication aid by going into the spanner. For example, a low battery, or if they're using alternative access like switches or eye gaze, the AAC learner can tell someone there's a problem and fix it here. This helps the AAC learner to start to develop skills which are important in becoming a proficient AAC user. Another feature of the magic wand page is the option to make the chat writing area bigger using this cell, which is helpful if you've written a longer message and perhaps you want to read back part of it. You can also read your message back a sentence at a time by using Speak Sentence, and you can print the chat writing area here too. To find out even more about SuperCore, you can download the manual from within the grid set in Grid 3 using the menu bar, or if you're using Grid for iPad, you can download it from our website. As well as lots of information about SuperCore and some background about how it was developed, the manual also includes some helpful ideas about how to get started with SuperCore using Simple AAC. Simple AAC brings together all of the big ideas about what we should be doing to support early AAC users to develop their communication in a way that's easy to follow and understand. Every letter of Simple AAC represents a different strategy, something you can do to help the AAC learner. But you don't have to do all of it at once. Simple AAC allows you to just focus on one idea at a time rather than trying to do everything at once. You can also read the full Simple AAC blog series by visiting our website here. And finally, you can download the Simple AAC workbook for more practical ideas. And if you haven't already, you can join our Facebook Smartbox community for more ideas and support using Grid for iPad, Grid 3 and SuperCore.